My name is Marc Savoy. I'm from Eunice, Louisiana, and I run a music store in my hometown, and I build accordions, which I have been for the last 51 years, since 1960. Well, what's special about this instrument, when I was contacted by the museum to build an instrument here for the center here, I wanted to build it out of something that was indigenous from Louisiana. And back about 30 years ago, we tore down and rebuilt a building that had been built by my great-grandfather on the property where we live. And one of the sills was, that we salvaged was out of heart pine. It was a pine that grew in Louisiana called red pine. It makes a great siding because due to the fact that it's so much harder than cypress, wind and water pelting it for hundreds of years will not erode it. Our house that we live in is 100 years old now, and it's made from this kind of wood here. And the siding on it is just as good as the day that it was put up. So it's not just a very durable wood, but it also has a beautiful grain. It's like the sap wood from the wood between the sap lines. The sap line itself is sort of cinnamony color, and then the wood between the sap lines is of a different color. So I chose this wood here to build the accordion for the museum. And because it's very, very attractive, and it also has this story that it comes from Louisiana. I think these trees are probably extinct now. I build instruments because I want to showcase the beauty of the wood, and I don't want to make it look gaudy. I don't want to put a bunch of rhinestones on it. You know, I don't really want to build instruments for people who want glitter and flash. The same as with the music. I don't want to play music if I have to put glitter and flash into the music. I want people to like it for the sake of the music. I started playing accordion at age 12. I grew up in the country, in a very isolated part of the country. My father and all of our neighbors were rice farmers. And most of the neighbors that we had in our community were guys who played music. You know, they were farmers, but guys who played music. And my father, was not a musician himself, had a deep love for music. And one day I heard this, I was playing in the yard, it was a late afternoon, I heard this music coming from across the field. There's a tenant that lived across the field in a little tiny cabin. And I asked my father, I said, I'd heard fiddle music before because, as I said, my grandpa was a fiddler, but I'd never heard this sound that came across the field. So I asked my father, I said, what is that sound that's coming over there? He said, that's old man Hiram Corville. He said, that's playing his accordion. I said, what's an accordion? And, you know, he's tried his best to describe it to me. And I was so interested in that sound, you know, I just said, wow, that's real beautiful. Because if ever you hear an accordion from way across the field, it sort of adds like a reverb to it or something. It's real, by the time the sound hits your ear, it's really, really melodic. So I told my father, I said, I'd like to see that. I said, why doesn't he come, when he comes to visit you, I said, why doesn't he bring his accordion? Oh, he said, he hardly ever plays. So one night for Christmas, before Christmas, he decided to have a Christmas Eve dance. And he was going to invite old man Hiram Corville to come play his accordion. And some other neighbors had played fiddle and accordion also. I was just dying to see that, how that worked, you know, an accordion. So they started playing, and the whole night that they played, you know, instead of going outside and popping fireworks with the kids my age, the whole evening I was there sitting down in front of these old musicians, especially the accordion player, and just watching him like a hawk would watch a mouse, you know, just watching him, everything he'd do. I was totally enamored with this music. It had stole my heart completely. And I just couldn't think of anything else. So the next morning, the old guy, Hiram Corville, comes up to the house, and he and my father are speaking in the yard. And I kind of found that strange that old man Hiram would have come back, you know, the next morning, unless he'd forgotten something or another. So I wanted to listen to the conversation. So I heard Hiram tell my daddy, he said, I was watching a little boy last night. He said, all he wanted to do, he said, is watch us play. He said, I've never seen a kid that interested in music. He said, I really think you should buy him an accordion. So about 2 or 3 weeks later, it took that long for my father to make up his mind to even approach him with the subject. 2 or 3 weeks later, he asked me, he said, would you like to have an accordion? I said, yeah. I said, I guess I'd like to have. I just didn't think it was possible that I'd ever have an accordion. Almost like, you want the moon? So he comes the following Christmas, and he says, well, he said, we're going to order you. We went to town, and there was a music store. He said, we're going to go to town and see if they can buy you an accordion. So we walked into this little music store in my hometown, and all that was there was instruments for country music or for rock and roll. Not one Cajun accordion in the place. And I thought that was so strange. So we asked old man Idom, where'd you get your accordion? And the answer was, we ordered on Sears Roebuck catalog. So we ordered on Sears Roebuck catalog. Accordion comes in right before Christmas. And it was the day that the dove season would open. And my father loved to go out in the field and hunt doves. In those days, there was thousands of doves. And I'd go with him to, I was his retriever, I'd pick up the birds. So we get back home, we go pick up the accordion, we come back to the house with him, it's lunchtime, so my mother says, y'all sit down, and I didn't want to open my box with my accordion, I wanted to be alone with my instrument when I opened the box. So my father said, you gonna come dove hunting with me? I said, no, I want to stay here with my accordion. So the story goes, we ate lunch, and after my father left to do his hunt, my mother told me this many times afterwards. I went in the front bedroom and I started unwrapping my accordion. I ran my fingers over the buttons to see what it responded like. And man, it was just brand new and shiny, a little Honer. And I picked it out and I played J'ai passé devant ta porte. I knew I could play it because I had heard that tune so many times. I knew exactly what to do. I picked it up out of the box, picked it and put it on my lap and played J'ai passé devant ta porte. So my mother says, my father comes in from the dove hunt and he hears music coming from the front bedroom, and it was me playing the accordion. And so my father says, he says, I hear that Hiram Corvin, instead of being out dove hunting, he's here playing, he's entertaining y'all. My mother tells him, it's not Hiram. Go see who's playing the accordion. So in walks my father, and my father was this man who was totally uneducated, had the 4th grade education. But he was a perfectionist at everything he would do. He was the best farmer in the neighborhood. He was the best cook. He was the best mechanic, the best carpenter, the best at everything he'd do. And at age 11 or 12, I was bad at everything I would do. If there's nothing I could do, I couldn't, work in the garden, or I'd chop up the vegetables instead of the weeds with the hoe. I was clumsy. I caught a lot of flack from my dad. He was a great, loving man, but anyhow, that was a big point of contention between us. And it was all my fault because I was just very clumsy. So my father walks in, and so instead of seeing this kid who can't do anything right, all of a sudden, and my father loved accordion music until it was like a narcotic for him. He loved that accordion music so much. So instead of seeing it was this little kid that can't do anything right, it was, wow, look at this kid playing the accordion, So instead of, what it did was to pick me up, out of the mire, out of the mud, and put me on a gold throne, because he had so much admiration for what I was doing. Just to see the expression that came upon his face, the look of admiration and interest, that his kid was playing the accordion almost as well as some guys had been playing for 50 years. To see that really made an impression on me, to see the look that came in his face. So I guess if it would have been anything whatever it took to make him have that response, I guess I would have wanted to do that for the rest of my life. It was just so powerful. So that kept on, and I began practicing and playing, and the more I'd play and the better I'd get. I had seen the old German accordions. Some of the neighbors had some of those old pre-war accordions, and I was never very impressed with them because it didn't really respond well. It was sluggish and kind of bulky. And a lot of the better players wanted those little new accordions that came from West Germany. And I said, you know what? I said, I think I could build one. I said, I want to try to build one. And the first thing my father said was, we don't know anything about that. He used the word we. Instead of saying, you don't know anything about that, he used the word we, which I knew meant, if you want to try, I'd like to help you, and see. He was interested in that himself because he loved accordion music so much. I just stayed dormant on my mind for 3 years. And then in 1960, I woke up one morning and said, I want to build an accordion. And all the tools that my dad had was a electric hand drill, a hand saw, and an axe, and a hammer, and a few tools like that. No power tools. So I set out to build an accordion with hardly anything at all, just pretty much what Mama had in the kitchen. And the first thing that I built I was so proud of it. I was just really, it sounded like, it sounded horrible. It sounded like a sick goose, a goose with laryngitis. So I finally wound up, when I began to see how bad it was, I said, I don't want anyone to see this. I'm going to burn it. So I lit a fire and I burned the darn thing. And I tried again. And the second was actually good enough that I sold it. I sold it to a neighbor. So everybody in the neighborhood, and even away, several miles away, would start bringing me their accordions. Can you fix this broken spring? Can you do that? Can you fix this? Can you do that? So pretty much, pretty soon I'd taken over my father's outdoor kitchen with my accordion repair business. I woke up one morning and said, hey, I'm an accordion technician all of a sudden, And then I began, I actually began making a few bucks with this. And my father told me, he said, I don't have any more room, he said, to have my little get-togethers with my friends. He said, I'd sure like for you to relocate your accordion operation, he said, elsewhere. I said, well, I don't have any other place to go. Well, my father had some commercial property on the 4-lane highway near Eunice, but still about 3 miles from the city limits. He said, I'll tell you what, he said, it looks like that's what you want to do. I was playing music and I was playing in a band. He said, it seems like that's what you want to do with your life, is to play music and make instruments, make accordions. He said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll give you the land for you to go establish yourself over there. I said, well, he said, you can build your little shop if that's what you want to do. And said, you can do it there. Well, I said, I don't have any money to do that, to build a shop. He said, I'll give you the money too. So when he told me that he would give me the property and give me the finances to build a shop, the idea came upon me, why not build a music store? So I decided to make a store and cater to the indigenous culture that was there, These people that Cajun music is predominantly Cajun in this area. Why not make a center to promote this culture, to make these people feel welcome? I speak their language. Why not, make instruments and supply the demand for these people? So I opened the doors to my music center in 1966. In the year 2011, I'm still there. 3 people that were there for my grand opening said to me, you're not going to last 90 days here. And I said, well, that's some bad news you're giving me. Why is that? They said, because you're too far out of town. And it was the truth. I was about 3 miles out of the city limits, way out in the country, to open up a commerce 3 miles out of the city limits. And what they were saying was, what they really meant, it wasn't that I was too far out of town, but I think what they meant was, it's impossible, you can't make a business on Cajun music, because in those days it was so stigmatized. Being Cajun meant that you were usually from the wrong side of the track. You were this ignorant French-speaking person. You played this crazy music. You didn't follow the normal American way of life. And I thought that was maybe so to some people, but I thought that the Cajun people were very respectable. They were wonderful, intelligent people, very, very, very talented, very adaptable. The people I learned music from, the old-timers, grew up in the time when there was no television, there was no radios, anything like that, And they were all day laborers, they were farmers. And being a farmer back, around the turn of the century, before you had tractors and, combines and powered equipment, it was all done pretty much, by sheer labor. So what else is that to turn to besides, making music yourself? And I think that's why the music meant so much to them. They had such a hard life, such a hard time making a living, that when they weren't working in the field, they wanted to play just as hard as they worked. And brother, they did. It was an outlet. And it also, people, of course, not all the people that in the area were musicians, or people who played music rather. But there were a lot of people who enjoyed the stage or the scene or the setting that this music would stage. In other words, these musicians would play in a house dance, and people would enjoy the fellowship of being with other people, where there was this music, and it was anything else but working in the field. They were totally uneducated people, but they had this innate sense of rhythm. They had this fantastic way of seeing something. They had a fantastic way of interpreting a tune, and it just made, by the sheer fact that they didn't know anything about music, it was straight from the heart. It was nothing that they read or nobody else's influence. It was strictly straight from the heart. And I think that's what's so unique about it. The Cajun music is the glue that holds the entire culture together. If it wouldn't be for music, Cajun culture would have died out years ago. And I think that music is such a bridge between people of different cultures, of people of different languages. It's such a bridge to understanding one another. Even if you don't understand their spoken language, if you can understand and appreciate the music, you get a lot of insight into what the people are, the people who play this music. I just couldn't understand how people were so down on Cajun culture. So I think the ulterior motive I had at the time was not just to open up a store and not just to make instruments and to make a living doing that, but to try to turn this thing around, to show the world that Cajun was very, very a wonderful culture, and to show the Cajun people that success and heritage could coexist. Those two things could be together. You didn't have to give up your language, or you didn't have to give up who you were to be a success. Heritage and success could coexist.